Hello and welcome to the 741 channel. Today I'm going to do another CB radio comparison. On the bench I've got my newest radio, my President McKinley. This thing is less than a year old. And over here I've got this Johnson Viking 4740 that was made in the late 70s. So I want to compare these radios side by side, see what their similarities are, and see what their differences are. So even though that both radios are capable of operating in AM and sideband mode, and both have 40 channels, the internal architecture of both is quite a bit different. So the President McKinley is what I'd call a modern architecture. The receiver is SDR based, and there's a lot of surface mount technology, LCD backlit screen, things like that. And the Johnson, of course, is old school. It uses a PLL chip and super heterodyne type receiver. So because of all those differences, I thought this would be an interesting comparison. So first let's look at the microphones. Here's the one that comes with the McKinley. I'd call this sort of a basic utilitarian, almost a ham style microphone. It just has a push to talk switch and a couple of buttons on the top so you can change the channel from the microphone. Now the microphone that comes with the Johnson doesn't have any channel controls on it. It's just a basic microphone with a fairly rugged push to talk switch. Now side by side, both microphones are actually about the same size, but as you might imagine, the older Johnson microphone is made from just slightly thicker plastic and just has sort of a more old school rugged feel to it than the newer modern President mic. So side by side, the Johnson radio is quite a bit bigger than the President radio and heavier, and it's also quite a bit deeper, as you may be able to tell when I lift this up. The Johnson has an LED-based channel display and an analog signal meter, and it's got incandescent front panel lights to show the mode. The McKinley, of course, has a backlit LCD screen with the channel readout, bar graph signal meter below, and indicators for various modes and functions of the radio. The Johnson radio has a bottom-firing speaker, which is why I have it propped up here, whereas the McKinley has a smaller front-firing speaker here. The McKinley uses a 6-pin microphone connection, which is pretty common on modern radios, whereas the Johnson uses sort of an older 5-pin microphone connector that's somewhat hard to find these days. In a way, it's similar to the DIN plugs that were used in the 80s, but it's got a little bit of a different pin pattern, and it's got a screw lock. The other thing with the Johnson is that the microphone jack is actually on the back of the radio instead of on the front like it is on the McKinley and most modern radios. So as far as features and controls, the Johnson obviously has a channel changer, fine-tuning or clarifier control for sideband, an RF gain control, on-off and volume control here, squelch control here, and then over here it's got a CVPA switch and a noise blanker on and off switch. The mode switch is over here on the corner and switches between AM, lower sideband, and upper sideband. And a little backlit Viking logo over here. So the President has a coarse and fine clarifier for sideband. It's got a channel control here that doubles as a function switch by pressing it in to access all the menus in the radio. Over here is the control for the squelch and the volume on-off control. And then down here are a series of buttons to control some of the modes of the radio, such as turning on and off the noise blanker and setting the mode between AM, lower sideband, and upper sideband. So now I'll hook an antenna up and we'll do a receive test of these radios and see how different they are from one another.
It still works pretty well. Believe it or not, the SWR is not much different. It's just a little higher than when it's actually up in the air. But I bet you the radiation pattern's a lot different.
Roger. Well, once I get the one end up, then I can take my time figuring out where I'm going to put the other end,
I was looking into one of them horse fence ones. I hear they're pretty wide banded because it's so wide. I guess, what is that, like a fence? Is that for fencing?
What it is, it's a strip of nylon, like a chicken fence, but it's like 6 inches or a foot wide, and they have steel wires woven in with the nylon wires. It's like 10% steel and 90% nylon. Does that make sense?
So it seemed like both radios were receiving the signals about the same. Now one difference that I noticed, and maybe you guys noticed it too, is that the received audio on the Johnson was a little bit muffly compared to what was on the McKinley. Now that could be because we have a bottom fire speaker, and I've just got this propped up on the desk here, so that could be part of it. Or it could be because it's a 40-year-old radio and the speaker's a little brittle and the circuitry is a little out of tune because it's old. So for sideband performance, I'd give a slight edge to the McKinley just because of the muffly audio on this radio. But having said that, I prefer the clarifier on the Johnson over the dual clarifier on the McKinley. It seems like the clarifier controls on the McKinley are a little bit touchy, and you get just a little bit off center and it changes, and then the further off center you get, the kind of less effect it has. Whereas on the Johnson, it's much more linear in feel and operation. So next, let's see what these radios sound like on AM.
It's not the worst deal in the world, considering it, like, especially if that's the only company that's actually, rewinding alternators for, like, passenger cars.
I know the 300 amp alternator for the 318 now. Last time I looked was somewhere around 250, so.
Yeah, I mean, if your compressor is not, if the compressor, the bearings and the nose of the compressor are still good, I wouldn't even worry about it. I'd just run it.
If I rip that out, maybe I will just put another alternator there. Yeah, I have that option to do that with my truck as well.
So as far as AM is concerned, the McKinley was much clearer than the Johnson. That muffly audio really reared its head in the AM test. But again, as far as signal strength and kind of readability of the signals, other than the muffly audio, I'd say both radios were about the same. Now this time we had one sort of weaker signal. It wasn't real weak, but it was weak enough to give us sort of a good comparison, and it did seem like both radios were receiving both signals about the same strength. So I don't really see an advantage to either radio in that department. So next up, I think what I'm going to do, just for fun, is fire up the SDR in the computer, and we'll do a cross-room test of the transmitters just to see what they sound like. Now, I'd like to really have a single microphone that I could swap between the two radios, but I don't have another microphone wired up that'll fit this radio right now. So this won't be a real good comparison between the two radios because we're going to be using the two different microphones. So that's going to skew things a little bit, but I figure we'll do the test anyway, just for fun, and just to see what these radios sound like on transmit side by side. This is a test of the President McKinley in AM mode. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. President McKinley AM mode. This is a test of the Johnson Viking 4740 in AM mode. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Johnson Viking 4740 AM mode. This is a test of the President McKinley in lower sideband mode. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. President McKinley, lower sideband mode. This is a test of the Johnson Viking 4740 in lower sideband mode. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Johnson Viking 4740, lower sideband mode. So let's take a look at some screenshots captured from the previous video clips. If we look up at the top left, you can see the McKinley AM versus the lower left, the Viking in AM. You can see that the McKinley is much narrower in AM than the Viking, and you probably heard that in the audio clips as well. And over on the right, you can see that the McKinley was much wider than the Viking in sideband, and it was quite a bit louder too. Now again, these results are a little bit skewed because we're not using the same microphone on both radios. And keep in mind, both radios could probably stand to be adjusted, especially the Viking since it's 40 years old. So now, I want to know what you guys think. Let me know down in the comments which radio you liked best. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. Thanks for watching.